You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to the program. We're going to talk politics now with Caroline Derby and Alex Kienlen. They are from KARK's political coverage team, the pros that they are. Good to have both of y'all with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Alex, is this your debut on Capitol View?
This is the first time on Capitol View.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you.
Today I am a man. Yeah.
All right, let's begin first. I want to start with Caroline first because she covered a bill, not a bill, well, it was a debate up at the state legislature over prison funding. This is the governor's $330 million appropriation to go along with this. It did not go as planned.
It didn't, and there was a lot of debate in this joint budget committee meeting. The Department of Corrections took a lot of questions, and there weren't many answers at the current moment. A lot of legislators asking things, what will the total cost for this be? What is your timeline? All things that they didn't currently have the answers to, but they said, Secretary of Corrections said that if they get an architect and they get an engineer, which they're working toward, then they will be able to answer some of those questions. And for the current moment, for some of those legislators, I don't know that that was good enough of an answer for them because that appropriation did not pass. And I think there was a lot of other debate too. The legislators took time to really kind of go in on the Department of Corrections, if you will, about the prison and the whole prison plan itself. And so not only asking questions about why should they appropriate this money right now, but the plans themselves and how that's going to look too.
Yeah, Senator Bart Hester kind of making the argument that this is just kind of the license to write a check. It does not give them permission to spend the money that we might put in their checkbook sort of thing. I think that was the pushback.
And weren't there also questions about staffing?
Yes, a lot of questions about how do you plan to do this. There were some comments made. One of the legislators believes you're going to have to go to Oklahoma to staff it, or people are going to drive 3 hours from Northwest Arkansas. Those were some of the concerns that they had. But as you mentioned, Senator Bart Hester said this is a typical process, and the analogy he used, we open the checkbook with the appropriation, but if they want to spend any of the money, they have to come back and get it approved again.
Yeah, Alex, you have been watching some of this power bill debate. This is a big, powerful influencer kind of debate here. You've got the electric utilities and some of the big business companies, Chamber of Commerce on one side. You did hear some debate from some folks that are opposed to rate increases, particularly around Pettigene area. Kind of give us a little synopsis.
Well, what was most interesting about the rate debate was, and Senator Dismank said, look, rates are going to go up if we build more power plants. But rates are going to go up if we don't build more power plants and we have more demand on the existing system. And of course, part of the pressure on this, we have 2 power plants shutting down in 2030, 2 of our coal-fired plants in the state out of the 5. So it is a point. Heads, our rates go up. Tails, our rates go up.
Yeah. This is kind of basically the debate here, I think, from my point of view, is you can pay a little bit incrementally over time and we can grow more power on the generation grid, basically, which Chamber of Commerce and economic development officials tell me we need this because we have projects. We had Buddy Haston from Electric Co-ops on the show a few weeks ago. He said I could double my generation output today just based on the projects that are waiting on me. And it takes 5 to 7 years to build a power plant. So.
Sure, and the incremental increase was, Senator Vivian Flowers was there when they announced this. And she was on board.
Stephanie Flowers.
Stephanie Flowers, excuse me.
That's right.
And she was on board with it because of the incremental increases she thought would be less impactful on her constituents.
Yeah, because sometimes when those rate increases come, it goes from, it could be a 50% increase all of a sudden for some people. This is allowed to be a little more gradual. Let's talk about nitrogen gas executions. Another big debate up there. A lot of heated debate up there as well. Arkansas hasn't performed any executions in several years since Governor Asa Hutchinson because they can't get the cocktail of chemicals that they need to do it. This would propose a new avenue.
Right, and using nitrogen gas in executions. It was a lead sponsor, Representative Wardlaw, and he made it very clear that this has been the hardest bill that he has ever run and may ever run just because of how serious it is. And the committee took that. They really, I feel like, had a healthy debate about it for the most part. And what this would do, we heard some testimony from a spiritual advisor who was with a man in Alabama who had a nitrogen gas execution, and he was in the room and described what that looked like. And it was hard, I think, for everyone in the room to hear that description. Ultimately, this did get out of committee, though.
Yeah. Did it get out on a voice vote, or was it did they do a roll call vote? Do you remember? I can't remember.
They did a roll call vote.
Did a roll call vote. All right.
Yeah.
So interesting. Did you watch any of that debate?
I didn't watch any of it, that particular debate. I'm certainly familiar with it. A lot of debate about the nitrogen, but as you point out, the drug cocktail that they use is getting harder to find, if not impossible. And we have 25 inmates on the state death row right now.
And I recall when we did those series of executions back in the Hutchinson administration. I mean, I think I remember the backstory on that. They literally bought those drugs like in a parking lot somewhere. I mean, it was a really kind of sketchy kind of deal in terms of how they even got the drugs to begin with. Do you remember that?
I do, not well. The one thing I do remember was the trauma on people that had to participate in the executions and having all these executions back to back.
Yeah.
And at the time I talked to some of those people and it was hard on them.
Yeah, difficult. Well, we'll see if that's out of the committee. The debate moves to the House floor now,
Yeah.
and then it still has to go through the Senate. We'll see what happens there. Anti-China bills. We did this last session. We're going to do it again this session, but we're going to take it even further. Does anybody want to give me an overview? I think I ran through some of that in the news block before here, but kind of what do you think the governor's getting at here?
You know, she wants to keep out, and she said this many times in her press conference, a communist China influence in the state of Arkansas. And one thing that I did notice with this, we've seen bills that she supports come in this big package, this one big bill, you know, hundreds of pages or, you know, however many pages it is. But they're separate bills with this by a couple different legislators. Mainly, one of the big things I noticed with this, I think, is making sure that state entities, they divest from China. She mentioned things like colleges and universities and the state retirement system. Here in Little Rock has a sister city in China, and so she would want that to end. Essentially, if colleges and universities have a Confucius Institute or a Chinese Cultural Center, which some of them do here in Arkansas, then they would need to end those programs as well. Other things like making sure we already have some restrictions on owning property in Arkansas, but those kind of expand to not owning any property around military bases, electric substations.
Yeah, it was a lot. There were a lot of things to unpack there. I guess my question kind of to both of y'all is on this. First of all, we've seen this from the previous session's bill that passed. We kind of falsely accused someone at one point in time. I asked the question in the press conference, does the governor have a new protocol for doing that? I didn't really get a good answer on whether or not she does or not. I thought the answer was probably not, you know, from the way she didn't answer it. But I mean, we actually took a person that's been here that's Taiwanese born, who had some property in Fort Smith, in the Fort Smith area, and literally, I mean, didn't do them any service, you know. I think there needs to be some safeguards in place to keep this from being publicized until you've done the due diligence, and I didn't see that. I don't see that in the legislation.
And I don't see that either. Ultimately, I'm not sure what impact this will have on the typical Arkansan. You know, it's not going to change our grocery prices, our electrical prices, or anything like this.
It could affect some retirees, though, because you're going to have some retirement systems that are going to have to divest from their, if they've got investments in mutual funds that might have Chinese companies in them. That was Howard Beatty, Representative Howard Beatty brought that up and spoke to that. He's a supporter of the bill, but he said that's probably where there'll be some impact. They were asked what the fiscal impact of that might be. It's about as well known as the prison cost right now, you know. So it was a big question mark.
Not all the answers quite yet.
Yeah, it was definitely.
Well, I had questions about colleges. You know, how will this impact Chinese students coming to this country?
Yeah.
And I know some of these universities have a pretty large cohort of Chinese students.
Or exchange programs from Arkansas students going over there. Yeah, no, I agree. And I hadn't heard anything from the Sister Cities folks either, and I'd be interested in hearing from them too. I actually have a friend on the Sister Cities Commission. I may call them when we get off air here.
There we go, yeah.
And say I'm following up. All right, lastly, the Republican women had a meeting this week that to announce kind of this litany of legislation that they either have filed or are going to file. I think it's all been filed now, but this is kind of building on something they've done in previous sessions. You want to speak to a little bit of what stood out to you?
Well, since you said a little bit, I'll say I thought the mental health aspect of it was the most interesting, that they're actually pursuing funding and putting administrative energy into improving mental health outcomes.
Yeah. that'll be big. Juvenile justice, another big area. There really hadn't been an overhaul of juvenile justice statutes since probably the 90s, when Governor Jim Guy Tucker called a special session to overhaul some juvenile justice legislation. This kind of piggybacks on top of the maternal health stuff that happened earlier in the session. You covered a lot of that, Caroline.
did,
Tell me, I guess, just now that that's done, we really didn't have a public bill signing of big magnitude, but they publicized it a lot.
They did.
So.
I think it was on social media when she signed those into law. But, you know, some things were in there that a lot of people are happy about. Some, you know, they wanted that Medicaid eligibility to be extended for 12 months postpartum. But some things that people were supportive bipartisan, presumptive eligibility, one of those big things. Some different avenues for telemedicine for mothers. And but yeah, you mentioned women. I know that's a big issue for women in Arkansas. And so that's already been done. And now they're setting a new goal for the rest of the session. I guess.
We'll see. I thought it a little late in the session to be laying out your agenda, but they did it anyway, and we wish them well because there were some pretty good issues to tackle in there. All right, about 30 seconds left. Anything you're watching for next week?
No, I truly don't have anything. I just wait and see what pops up and
You got anything on your calendar? Because
I'll
I'm
be
going to tell you what you
interested.
should be watching for. But go ahead.
I'll be interested to see what happens, anything with the prison again this week. If that, I think that can come back in some different methods, so we'll see about that too.
All right, I got 10 seconds left. Hoops for kids' sake. We got to see who hurts themselves in this. There's way too many of them that should not be playing that will be playing. And we'll see if the House can break the Senate's big, long win streak there. Caroline and Alex, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate you very much.